Hi, this is Sindu Sreebhavan, helping you to ramp up your creativity and roll out your innovation journey. In a previous session, I shared with you that design thinking is a step-by-step approach to innovate. There are 5 steps in design thinking. They are empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Problem solving is not new. People have been solving problems forever, isn't it? So what is the difference between using the traditional methods of problem solving and design thinking? In other words, what is so special about design thinking? Before I answer that question, let's discuss a little bit about the 5 stages of design thinking. The first stage is empathize. Empathy is all about understanding the emotional needs, response, and reaction of a person towards the problem that we are dealing with. We are not talking about any person. We're talking about person or people who are facing this problem constantly. So in design thinking, we are not just focusing on solving the problem from a functional point of view. We are also focusing on solving the emotional effects caused by the problem. And that is the reason why design thinking is also known as the human-centered design process. The second step is define. It's the problem definition phase. As I mentioned earlier, we have always been solving problems. Every day we solve problems. But more often than not, we start with solutions. We start with saying we need a new chair, we need a new playground, we need a new seating arrangement for the class, we need a new menu. What if we focus more on the problem first? More on understanding the problems from a functional as well as emotional perspective. If we do that, you will be surprised. The solutions that you would come up with would be vastly different from the solution that you otherwise come up with. Once you do that, you will realize that you have come up with multiple sub-problems that are constituting to the main problem that you had observed. And at this point, you will realize whether you want to address all those problems or one of those problems or a few of those problems. So far you have seen what is design thinking, what are some of the common myths and misconceptions about design thinking, and you also know what are the 5 steps of design thinking. And I have shared a little bit of details about the first 2 steps, which is empathize and define. Now let's move on to the next step, which is ideate. As the word suggests, ideate is about ideas. So at the end of the second step, that is problem definition, you have shortlisted the problems that you want to solve. So now it's time to focus on how you want to solve it. And in the ideate phase, that's what we are about to do. We are going to do a divergent thinking. That is, you're going to think as if you have got all the resources, all the money, and all the decision-making power in the world to solve this problem. That means you're not constrained by anything. Do not constrain yourself to any types of limitations that will limit your thinking process. You're not going to say no to any ideas to yourself or to other people in your group. So once you have come up with as many ideas as you can, you will find one or many ideas that you will be able to use to solve the problems that you identified. With this, you move on to the next stage, the fourth step in the design thinking process, that is prototyping. Now, what is prototyping? Prototyping is making a model of your idea or your top ideas. You're not making the actual product. You're making a model of the product using whatever material is available. Now, why do you make a prototype? A prototype gives you a 3D visual of what your product is going to be. And there are many advantages for that. Number one, you will get an idea of how that product will look like. And with that visual idea, you will also be able to come up with whether that design is going to fulfill the functions. At that point in time, you might also notice that, I might need to change certain things so that I can fulfill what the user had told me. And once you do that, you can also share your prototype with your user. And when the user sees that, the user will get an idea of what the product is. They can also give you feedback of whether this is what they meant when they gave you their requirements or when they shared their problems as well as their preferences with you. You will also be able to explain the function of that product much better with the help of a 3D visual. It's definitely going to help you when you make the actual product. Now we move on to the next stage, which is the fifth stage or the fifth step of design thinking. Testing. The user tests whether the prototype satisfies what they were looking for in terms of how it looks and in terms of how it functions. I mentioned about this a little bit when I talked about prototyping as well, right? Is the testing happening only at the final stage? Not really. You're always communicating with your user. When you came up with the problems, you discussed that with the users. When you came up with the ideas for the solution, you discuss that with the users and you get feedback from them. At each and every stage, the user involvement is there. Since they are involved, you are always trying to provide what they want to solve their problem. You are not just communicating with them, you are also taking their feedback, making changes and showing it again to them, getting their feedback. It's an iterative process. That means it repeats. Every stage you can repeat as many times as you want. What is the benefit of doing this? You see, if you look at some of the companies that design and develop their products using design thinking, you will see that most of the time or majority of the time their product is a success. That is because the product development team is in constant communication with a select group of users so that they have already got all the major feedbacks from them. And hence, they have improved their product over the time. It's a much refined version of what they were thinking about in the beginning. So their products get better acceptance. And that is the beauty of design thinking. We have seen all stages or all states or all steps of design thinking so far. So the first step is empathize. Second step is define. Third step is ideate. Fourth step is prototype. And the fifth step is testing. And all these steps can iterate or repeat as many times as you want. And that is the design thinking journey.